Evening, everybody and anyone. Thanks for joining me. Tonight I want to talk about the old housing situation in Ireland. It's kind of crazy. I wanted to put together a few bits on it, so I'm going to go through it. Not a huge ramble, just go through the news, a selection of news, a selection of stats, facts. Stats and facts are boring. We won't do too much of that. But just a little look at some of the more stark things that are going on in Ireland right now as regards housing. I think I put in my thumbnail, my bad thumbnail just a while ago there, housing, immigration, apocalypse. And I don't say that just for clickbait. It's sort of an accurate, calm, measured way of describing the situation, the housing situation in Ireland right now. In fact, I would say, and one of the reasons I enjoy having some sort of platform to come on and talk to people about it, I find it cathartic, is because otherwise I would think I was going mad. You have news about the housing crisis. You kind of have, maybe this is just alienation or something, but there's news about it. People on TikTok and X talk about it and all of that. And then you go out in the real world and there's a little bit of passive commentary on it. Oh, the housing market is crazy. And yeah. But I find myself sort of still feeling like it's not really grasped how apocalyptic and how catastrophic is, which is a word I like to, it is a catastrophe. It's not like 5, maybe 6, 7 years ago. If you remember, we were talking about a housing crisis in 2018, probably before that. There was talk about a housing crisis. Housing is very expensive, getting very expensive. People can't afford it, That was a housing crisis, like a cost of living crisis, or there's been a bit of a water shortage because of the hot weather. One of these news terms that's kind of out there. Housing crisis. It just sort of sounds, even though the word crisis is in it, it's become desensitized. And I find myself kind of thinking it's a catastrophe, and it's not some bit of passing weather. That is just something like a speed bump, which is a bit of rhetoric the media like to kind of go with. The idea that, I'll get into it more in a while, that everything is going great. So the fundamentals of everything are wonderful. We have a little problem, a little niggle that needs to be ironed out. That sort of thing. We need to tweak a few policies and we'll sort it out. And we won't even be that panicked about it. It's just like a little spot, a little zit. What do people call it? Just a little something that needs to be worked on. But the structure, the overall body, the overall corpus is grand, really. And no panic. And it's like, I don't think people, I'm sure a lot of you do, get the scale of it. So what I want to do tonight is go through a couple of bits. There's one major flagship kind of article pointing at one individual stat that does kind of touch a nerve, and it's stark and it's shocking. And I want to focus on that a little bit and then go from there. I suppose, without further ado, is this what I'm looking for? Or is this what I'm looking for? Yeah, it's somewhere there. So this was in the Irish Times, and it was, why is the housing crisis in Ireland after 11 o'clock? I can't seem to read. I must stop embarrassing myself. But anyway, why is the housing crisis Ireland's most enduring failure? And this is the key bit. The homeownership rate among those aged 25 to 39, if you haven't heard already, once considered a prime homeowning age, has dwindled to just 7%. 7%. Not 70 or 17, 7%. And there's a lot of rumination needs to be done on that. And the reason why this is a good stat too, by the way, and I was just listening to Last True Gale, a friend of mine, an online friend of mine, who was and maybe still is streaming on Telegram. Good detail. He was going through economic data and all of that. I was enjoying it. But he and others, there's a guy on Telegram called Archiving Irish Diversity, where you can get great stuff on this too. And others have mentioned it. Breaking down recent election data. For anyone watching after the fact, if you want the source, hit me up in the comments and I'll send it back to you. But looking through various data that's out on electoral, economic, general survey stuff, as regards the economy, housing, whatever, And what they were doing, which is important, is breaking down a lot of these things by demographic, because you can't really just look at Ireland, to take our country here, which is what we're talking about, as some whole thing, because like any entity within it, you have different. You will have people who are doing very well, people who aren't, etc., etc. You will have one demographic votes this way, the other demographic on some other end votes a completely different way. In the end, the vote goes one way, but you need to look into the data to see what different demographics are doing. And when you find extreme differences, it tells you a lot about the society, right? Or whatever the subject might be. And the reason why this stat is good is because it's focusing on 25 to 39. I don't know what the number would be if you looked at home ownership in Ireland. It would be down from its former self, obviously, but it would still be high because, of course, people over the age of 39, 49, 59 own houses galore, right? They own their own house, they own another one, etc. And so there is a big lie often told in generalized, let's say, national statistics. And the story is often much more intense than one would otherwise think. Here's one example. As we're talking about immigration, of course, people love to talk about the idea of, by the way, share this out, like, subscribe, you can super chat, you can click the links, whatever you want, right? Or you can just sit there and enjoy it and, listen away. Just get that out of the way. But one of the things, examples here for this would be immigration. People say, when will Irish people, like Irish people who have like long descendants here, kind of thing, native indigenous people to the country, when will they become a minority? Because that's our big apocalypse date. And they say it's 20, 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever they say. And it's actually not really that relevant in a sense. That's the wrong way of looking at it. The way I look at it is I ask Grok or whatever. People don't like AI, but it's useful. Or you could just crunch it yourself and take 100 times longer, right? But I ask it a simple question in one sense. Take a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old Irish lad now. Tell me what percentage of his age, specifically 18-year-olds, are Irish born, native, whatever slice you want to take of it, right? What percentage? And it'll say something like 73%. And you say, when will he be a minority in his specific age? So not 19 to 35-year-olds or anything, just for 18-year-olds specifically. So we're just zooming in on one guy, case study, sort of like following him. Like one of these documentaries where they start out with a subject who is 10 years old, and the documentary takes 20 years, and you follow them over the course of their lives, and you study them, or whatever it is, right? One of those things. So you follow a point in time. You follow this 20-year-old, and you ask, when will he become a minority, i.e. less than 50% of his demographic, his age? And it'll tell you something, I can't remember exactly. It'll say something like it's in 6 years, 7 years, something like that. Because what is going on there is that he is entering the age at which most immigrants who come to the country are his age, if that makes sense. So Ireland's demographics, I mean, maybe I'm explaining the obvious here, but it's just worth kind of thinking about. Our demographics in Ireland for Irish people are between 0 and 90 or whatever it is, right? But the immigrants are not between 0 and 90. They're disproportionately not like that at all. Most of them are between the ages of like 20 and 40. That's kind of common sense. We see that, we know that. The peak age is maybe somewhere in the middle, 30 odd. The vast majority of them, I'm kind of paraphrasing stats here, I don't have them to hand, I'm just generally speaking, these are kind of true. So like you will have an inordinate number, let's say 70%, whatever it is, are hovering around the age of like 30, some less, some a little bit more, but around there. That's all the immigrants, and that's all the population growth. And so if you have 100,000+ non-Irish immigrants who come in annually, a lot of them, when this 20-year-old is turning 24, or the clock changes from 24 to 25, a lot of those 100,000 will actually be his exact age. And so what happens is that in any given year, a lot of his compatriots, Irish people his age, will leave the country for Australia or whatever. And then a lot of people will come in his age, and the rate at which that's happening is sort of catastrophic. So talking about 60-year-olds isn't relevant. Not a lot of 60-year-olds come to Ireland. So you realize that actually, like, it's a catastrophe in the making. What you have to do, what I'm trying to say, is that what's happening to Ireland right now is disproportionately affecting what we call young people. The new version of young people in Ireland is under 40 years old, but really like 20 to 30 people are entering that age demographic. They're effectively in a nuclear bomb situation, and stats about the whole country do not cut it when you're talking about economics, demographics, home ownership, any of that. And so this is one of those ones where we cut through the bullshit. 25 to 39, the home ownership rate is 7%. Now, bear in mind, that's an average. So a lot more 39-year-olds are going to own houses. So if you split the difference and you say, let's say 30 years old, that number is going to be less. What's it going to be? 3%, something like that. I don't know. It's going to be less. So once you're down to like sub 5%, 3, 4, 5%, 2%, who knows, you're basically talking about your average 30-odd-year-old in Ireland, like, does not own a home. And not average. Almost all of them. You have 100 people there, 3 or 4 of them are going to own their house. 30 years old is, but that's the other thing as well. A lot of the 7% are foreigners, but that might be the same for all demographics. I'm not sure, but I'm just checking the chat. Sorry, but yeah, like, you have 100 people, less than a handful of them own their house, and that's maybe 30 years old. That is not, the media call it us young people. I'm 34 now. I'm not young. You know what I mean? I'm young to some, I'm old to others. But as an objective thing, I'm not a young person. You know what I mean? I have a kid of 3 and a kid of 1 now, a child of 1 and a child of 3. And I'm not as agile as I used to be. More aches and pains, getting on a little bit, that kind of way. And some very older people might laugh, but that's how it is for me. I don't feel like some young man anymore. The fact that I have children now and I'm married and I do own a home, thankfully, feels overdue. You know what I mean? It biologically, spiritually, whatever way you want to look at it. So the fact that 30-year-olds, almost to a man, don't own a house, and come on, the prospects aren't great, it's not getting any better, is catastrophic. I've got some birth stats as well here. That overall births, so 72% of mothers who gave birth in Ireland in 2024 had Irish citizenship. Now, bear with me here. So 72% had Irish citizenship. This is down from 76% in 2022. So in just a few years, it's dropped about 4%, right? The amount of mothers who are Irish. The other thing to bear in mind there is that that's Irish citizenship. A lot of the people who have had kids who do have Irish citizenship are foreigners by a lot of people's definition. They have a foreign accent. They came here 10 years ago. There's nothing wrong with them or anything, but they're not, like, by most people's definition, Irish, right? So you're going to be looking at, we don't know because we don't have the data, but if it's 72% citizens, if you look at just Irish, you're pushing down towards half pretty quickly there. If we're not there now, we'll be there next year, the year after, it doesn't matter. So you're basically looking at now or soon where half the births are to foreigners. And the other thing too is that births are down overall 1% from 2023 to 2024. They went down 1%. And in the last decade, they've declined 4.5%. This is like a work PowerPoint here I'm giving you. I'll get off the stats in a sec, but if the births are down, according to this Irish Times or whatever article, or CSO stuff, they're down 4.5% in the last decade, but they were down in 1 year recently by 1%. If you follow that, the rate of decline of births overall is decreasing. It's basically speeding up the decline. This is in spite of the fact that we're bringing in 100,000+, whatever it is, foreigners every year, many of whom are women in their childbearing age. So if you had, we don't have access to it, unfortunately. If you had access to the granular data, I would say that's looking pretty catastrophic too, because of course, looking at birth rates and all of that, and even citizenship, which hides a lot of the reality, what you're looking at probably there is a birth rate that is in absolute free fall, and we just don't have the data. But you can speculate from what you do have, read between the lines, that that probably is the case. It's also common sense, right? That is bound up with this housing crisis thing. If something like less than a handful % of people who are 30 own a home, it's very hard to have children, get married, find a partner, settle down, feel confident enough to do it. It's a scary thing initially as well. Like once you're having a kid, you're having a kid. And if you have a second one, a third one, whatever, it's a different thing. But that decision to go from a single or in a couple, but haven't made that leap yet, that's a big decision. People need to feel like their nest is feathered, that they're in a position to do so, understandably. So you just have, I mean, genocide, ethnic cleansing are big terms people are sensitive about because the UN have, made them a certain way. It's only for this or that case, but you have something akin to a wipeout going on, basically. I'll stay away from those loaded terms. An absolute wipeout, a systematic wipeout of the Irish nation, the Irish people, the likes of which has never been seen. You can look at the plantations. Aspects of those were harsher. They were different times and all of that. Foreign crown rule. You could compare and contrast, but in terms of in the nature of it, but in terms of the scale of it, there has been nothing like this. And in fact, bar the likes of Canada, a lot of Western countries, I suppose, but I don't think anything like this has ever been seen on Earth, to be honest. And you could go back to like Mongols sieging Baghdad, whatever, how many 100 years ago. It was a more violent time, different nature and all that. But in terms of actually just wiping out a population, making a population go from being pretty much homogenous and thriving. If you watch Bachelor's Walk from 20 years ago, a silly show, but it just gives you a window into Dublin around 2001. You watch the Corrs playing Lansdowne Road around the same year, maybe. Lots of Irish people dancing around, having the crack. Corrs are playing Kelly. Everyone feels like there's such a positive future there. Almost everyone's Irish. They're just normal people being normal in their own country with a sense of hope for the future, stability. You have jobs, homes, all the rest of it. To go from, and it was pretty much homogenous, a small smattering of foreigners here or there, right? But to go from that to a situation where currently, and within the next 10, 20 years, but currently as well, that's the thing people need to know, you're looking at less than half of the births, maybe somewhere around half of the births are Irish. The housing estates are being bought up by Indians, and the rest of it, you go to a new build thing, and we'll look at that. It is a complete systematic wipeout, and I don't think people quite get it. And I just think the term housing crisis is a bit weird. Anyway, I'll get into the substance of this quickly. It's late, so I'll try to keep it quick, right? So this article goes on about how bad it is, basically. It lists out some of those stats. It's really bad. The average rent in Ireland is $2,000, right? Where are people meant to get that from? And that's the average. So that's not Cork, Dublin, whatever. That's the average between everywhere. And it goes on about how some of the government's policies, they have a housing czar that's being paid $450,000 who doesn't know what the fuck he's doing or doesn't intend to really change anything. It's all Mickey Mouse, right? There is no government actually trying to fix this. The whole gig is to inflate assets for pensions, for mega rich, faceless global investors. And it's basically somewhere between a gerontocracy, a sort of hoovering the value of people's labor. So people work, people toil, people save, people scrimp, do all the rest of it. They live their lives and they end up as net debtors, basically, mainly through housing And so effectively, it's like there's a hose attached to their body and it sucks the juice out of them. And imagine this hose connected to hundreds of thousands, millions of people, and it's sucking like an inordinate amount of juice out of everyone, and it goes into a big tank, and then it gets funneled out to other places, and those people feed on and grow from and benefit from that human juice, we'll call it, right? So those people are average boomers with their like cushy pensions, good situation. It sort of doesn't come from nowhere. It's kind of like you know, it's like a lot of investments in a way, like not all, but a lot of it, it sort of comes at someone else's expense. You could almost look at it like bookies as well or something. If you go to the bookies and you score big on a horse and you make a couple of grand, the bookies is able to pay you on the basis that so many other people came in and lost their money, right? And it's kind of like that. So that juice, that lifeblood is going somewhere, and it's going to boomer pensions, gerontocracy, wealthy boomers, and of course just random shareholders that are all over the world whose money, your mortgage or your rent or the added value from all of that gets funneled over through Frankfurt or London or New York or whatever, and someone else just receives passive income from just owning wealth. They put in €1 million into whatever fund thing. I don't claim to know about all that in detail. You put in €1 million every year, you get so and so back. Wonderful. It's brilliant, right? I'm making this up, I don't know. I just made 40 grand, 50 grand, I don't know. You didn't actually, and this is like, sounds like a communist kind of thing or whatever, but a critique of capitalism. But it's just like pretty realistic, let's be honest. Especially when it comes to just inflated property value and portfolios that are divvied up a million different ways. The person who makes the benefit from their €1 million sitting there, they didn't go out and toil. They didn't necessarily invest in some rinky-dink little company that had a bright idea that nobody had faith in, and then they invested in it. I'll give you money. And then it turns out your idea actually solves a huge problem for a lot of people, and everybody wants to buy one. And now it's created a lot of value. And because you invested in that, and the idea is now worth 100 times more, you get 100 times return or whatever you get back. Wonderful, right? That's kind of unimpeachable. When you're just looking at the mass property financialization market stuff, it is just someone who works in a chipper. They work their arse off and they work 60 hours a week, and then they just about pay for some small shitty 1-bedroom thing, and it's owned by some big company and another company, and it ends up in Frankfurt, through Frankfurt. Effectively, they were slaving away at their chips and burgers, and a lot of the surplus value of the sweat that they did just kind of got transferred over to some random person. And property is a huge vehicle for that sort of uncreative, exploitative, predatory capitalism, I think. It's obvious. And we see it as well with the boomer thing, that a lot of boomers, don't get offended if you are one, but in a way that's almost unprecedented in history, they seem to have it very cushy, right? And I don't begrudge them, but it's just you have to look at the other side of the ledger here a little bit, that a lot of them seem to be very cushy. It's a bit of a caricature, but it's not that crazy. Off on holidays here and there, new car, all the assets paid off, decent bit of money there, kind of hanging out. And then you look at your average 30-year-old who is working, who is doing their best and the rest of it, and they're not in the position that that boomer was at all. You have this completely split society by age, and it's off the fucking wall. A lot of that is what's going on there. So anyway, back to the article. Yeah, the rents are a lot. I want to get to one specific bit because you can just read it yourself if you want to look it up. It starts by stating how bad the problem is, how ineffectual the government stuff is, and then it goes through other possibilities that might be useful. And effectively, it's talking about policy tweaking. Well, if we change this zoning thing and that zoning thing, it'll be a better idea, blah, blah, blah. I believe that's sort of nonsense. Supply side stuff, policy tweaking, gaining efficiencies. Yeah, but ultimately the problem, as I someone says, "Don't hate the boomers, hate the system." The two are fairly wrapped up with each other. That's the problem as well. I could talk about that more, but I think these little tweaks. There are two problems. One is immigration, right? If you're spoiler alert, this doesn't mention immigration at all, and none of them do. Elephant in the room, all of that. That's one problem. Because if you came up with a magical supply side solution that threw 30,000 extra properties on the market year to year, wonderful. I mean, that's great. More houses, wonderful. That should fix the situation, let's say, or help the situation. But of course, if you have an endless tap of people coming in, the prices go down a bit. It becomes a more attractive place for someone from India to come versus England or Canada or anywhere else. The houses are that bit cheaper. It's gotten better. And so where you have unloaded water from the boat, more water just kind of rushes in, if that makes sense. Because the supply side of immigrants or water into the boat or whatever is insatiable. It's unlimited. There is no limit. So what you need to do is set limits, set a fixed situation on that end, and then supply side stuff is relevant and useful, of course, and will lead to a supply demand kind of more of an equilibrium, prices come down. But if you're just going to studiously avoid immigration, it's sort of neither here nor there, to be honest. The second thing is the political issue, is that I always say it's not a housing crisis. People say it's not a housing crisis, it's an immigration crisis. And I always say it's not a housing crisis, it's not an immigration crisis, it's a political crisis. Because, of course, TLDR is that if the people backing and forthing with each other here, the author of the article, the guy in the university who gives his expertise, the various politicians who are wrangling with each other, Mary Lou versus Dara O'Brien versus the housing czar, blah, blah, blah. It's fairly simple. You cut immigration down. To what extent? That's debatable. You could say, we'll just limit it to what is strictly necessary. In effect, you have to reorient the whole system, really, because it's all baked in. But you start reorienting. You say, some immigrants are essential. Some need to be in Intel to keep the thing running. Intel provides lots of surplus value to Ireland. So do the pharmaceuticals. If they need someone in to do specialized work, then you roll out the red carpet. You bring them through, nice and easy, in and out. And you say, hey, you're here for do your thing, work, but you're on a guest visa, same way you would be in Dubai or anywhere else. And when you're done, you leave and there'll be no issue. Same with, what about healthcare? What about construction? The vicious cycle of construction. Well, we need people to build the houses. Well, yeah, you say, okay, we'll let people in. In fact, we might cut one sector and bring in a little bit more of them for a second with a real aim to reorient the whole system so that you can kind of wean yourself off it a little bit. So overall, the message would be, where possible, we'll cut some. For example, you bring 100,000 people, move them into Cahersiveen against the wishes of everyone there, and they just sit around in a hotel. They're gone straight away. Unemployed, non-citizen immigrants in Ireland, of which there are many. No country in the world does that. No country in the world would think it's unreasonable to kick them out. You could go on and on. Low-hanging fruit, higher fruit. See what you can do. But the ethos is to stem it, stop it, and clear out some of the people who are here who don't need to be here, and work your way along that. You just move in that direction as opposed to the other. If you did that, and then if you cut red tape and you started building houses left, right, and center, just take all your common sense supply solutions that make sense, that are logical, and just go for it. You build houses. You do both of those things, not one or the other. You do both of those things, and housing prices would basically crater, in my opinion. I know there's a lot of pent up demand, but the signals it would send to the markets would be immediate. If you had a genuine statesperson here who actually had control and was believable and real, and the message was sent out that they're not fucking around, basically, they're actually just going to do this. The price signals that would send straight away. All sorts of people would start selling off. International investors would go, okay, jig is up, sell it off, sell. And then the Irish state is coming in to try to finance its own housing, come up with new different ways to do it. It would be instantaneous. The prices would start going down to some extent. And then over the years, it would just keep going. You'd just be bringing the price right down. that's pretty much common sense. I mean, like, that's kind of open and shut. That's the end of it. Like you could debate what exact supply solutions would you have? How many immigrants would you be chucking out or stopping to come in? We don't know. That's. But either way, that those two things are going to be pursued aggressively and sincerely. That's the end of story. Housing crisis will just melt away immediately, and then over time, just melt away. No more housing crisis. Houses aren't cheap. It's the most expensive thing you'll ever buy, but everybody, more or less, if you know, you do your thing, you can get a house. No big deal. We forget about that now. Now we'll start building communities, having children, the rest, normal country. That's the end of it. That's the answer. But you have all this kind of dicking around with minor silly policy initiatives. The one bit I wanted to get to in specific, and I find this one kind of fun, was at the end here, they bring in and I will enlarge in the screen here because I kind of need you to help me here, actually, and I will keep an eye on the chat. This kind of blew my mind. So you need your weed with you here. You need your pipe. You need drugs for this one, or maybe I just can't understand these academics. So they consult the typical academic expert on housing. Bear in mind, this is all in the absence of mentioning immigration. I'm reading through this article, waiting for the immigration thing. I know they're not going to go get them out, but I'm thinking, well, come on, it's 7%. We can all see what's happening. They have to mention it to some extent, even in euphemisms or something. They just have to. Come on. And so we get towards the end and they have their expert, and I think, well, is this it? And so the average price paid nationally is over 430 grand. Now we get to the guy. So, quote, demand clearly exceeds supply, but this is reflected in pricing signals. Rents and house prices are both rising in real terms, unquote. Lecturer in property economics and real estate at TU Dublin, John McCarthy, says. Okay, so we've introduced our expert, right, from a university, lovely. And he's mentioned demand. So we go, okay, he's going to say demand is huge. Maybe it's something to do with immigration, but ultimately our economy is something like that. And he does say that, but it's actually worse than I expected. This is the bit. Okay, I'll rush through it. Demand clearly exceeds supply. Yeah, I got that bit. However, he questions the widely held assumption that this reflects the failure of construction to keep pace with population growth. Quote, in fact, and contrary to public perception, a combination of new builds and absorption of vacant properties provided enough accommodation to keep pace with growth in household numbers between 2011 and the most recent census, he says. That's a bit of mumbo jumbo. I want to skip to my favorite bit. This is my favorite bit because it's like there might be some world in which this kind of makes sense. If you've smoked enough weed, you go, in the abstract, it's maybe true in some world, but I, unfortunately, am living in reality. And so this one is kind of fun. I spent the other day about 3 or 4 minutes with a friend. I was rambling about it and I was reading it to them and saying, can you understand that? And it was like, no, I don't really get it. I was going, okay, I'm actually going to I'm going to word by word try to understand this, and bear with me. If one of you explain it and it makes sense in some different way and I'm just totally not getting it, fine, I'll take the L on it. So instead of housing demand being like just saying, hey, there's like 100,000 people coming in here, we build like 20,000-30,000 houses, not even, it's totally out of whack. Basically immigration. Yeah, obviously we're bringing in a fuckload of people to the country. We all see that. That's the truth. And what he says then is housing demand is actually about the willingness and ability of society to pay for housing rather than being about population growth per se, McCartney says. So could I zoom in on that bit? Could I highlight it for you? Just see if you can work with me on this. This is after him self-declaring that it's an absolute catastrophe. Or sorry, him and the author of the article. 7% of people own houses in childbearing years, basically. And what we come down to for the expert is, okay, so I'm going to go through it. Housing demand is actually about the willingness and ability of society to pay for housing rather than being about population growth per se. So my reading on that was that, in effect, housing demand, you could talk about 100,000 people coming in drives up price. That's reality. But let's hit the bong a second and let's reevaluate what is meant by demand. I think it's that if everybody were willing to just walk out onto the street at night, just put in their headphones, charge their phone at a shopping center or something, and when nighttime comes, they just kind of stand there on the street, in a public park, find a field, just walk around or whatever, lay your head on a wall somewhere, just fall asleep. And then you wake up and you brush your teeth in the river. Then you go to work or do whatever you're doing. You come back and you buy a meal deal from Tesco's and you just stand around more. So, that lifestyle where you don't own a house, you're homeless effectively. If everybody were homeless, living in a cardboard box or just standing there 24/7, there would be no demand for housing. And so the fact that that is not the case and that people want houses and are thus willing to pay their wages or whatever value they have for a house, that is what actually stimulates demand. So that is the basis of demand for housing. Now, if any of you can read that, if it's visible to you on your screen, am I reading that correctly? Housing demand is about the willingness. So the fact that basically the cardboard box standing around in a field example, the fact that that's not the case and people are exceedingly willing and desirous to own a house, and because they have resources, they will give their resources for the house. And effectively, if the price of the house goes up and there's nothing else they can do, one house is really expensive, but actually the other one is too, and the one across the country is too, and they're all expensive. Because people, it seems, want houses, that drives demand. So it's the fact that they need and want houses. Human beings need and want houses and are basically infinitely flexible within their resources. They will, you can basically squeeze them as hard as you can and they will go as far as they can, because more than anything else in their life, they need a house. Is that correct? And if it's not, it's kind of like, my question is, well, what else is he saying there? Exactly. And the fact that you even have to kind of break it up, I always maintain that, and I can get a bit flowery with the old language sometimes, but if something is true and you're just stating it sincerely, a fact, an observation, it shouldn't be difficult to figure out what sort of mind-numbing abstraction is meant in the sentence. Only when someone is avoiding stating a truism and just observing sincerely will they have to get into these kind of weeds. But I think that is it. Housing demand is actually about the willingness and ability of society to pay for housing rather than being about population growth per se. So never mind the 100,000 people coming in. Yeah, maybe that adds numbers, but that's nothing, because all of the hundreds of thousands of people, there's a greater number of people who just want a house and will do what they have to do to get a house. That's fundamentally where demand comes from. And it's like, okay, so are we going to say that fundamentally demand comes from the replication of cells? We go back to when, whatever it's supposed to have happened, a lightning bolt shot into a pond scum and the first replicating cell came from rocks or whatever. So that's fundamentally where demand comes from. I wouldn't be looking at immigration. I'd be looking at the primordial soup is really where demand is coming from. Like, it's like, well, I mean, yeah, if I'm ripping on the bong, that's cool, bro. Like, way of looking at it. But like, again, let's come down to reality. That demand is just from all the immigrants coming. That's where all the population growth comes from. You're meant to be an expert. What the fuck are we doing? This is in the concluding passage of the article where the expert weighs in and says what needs to be done or what's relevant to what the problem is, and that's what we're left with. And it started with 7% of people own a house. Are we taking the piss? And that's the problem, is that from politician to journalist to expert and all of that, that's why I say it's a political problem. They don't actually want to solve the housing crisis. If you did, hand on heart, Scouts honor and all that, I'll say anything, I'll do anything. Just I'm trying to solve. I want houses to get cheaper. That's what I want to do. I want to get houses to be way cheaper relative to incomes and all of the rest of it. That's what I want to do. And I've no limits on what I'll do. That's the prime objective. But they don't. They don't. The whole economy is built on this exploitative capitalism thing, whoever the beneficiaries are, and they don't want to solve it. And they work for those vested interests. It's just as simple as that. And so every article, every statement from a politician, every expert from a university who's ultimately part of the system as well, it's bullshit. It's just all bullshit. They're not trying to. So there is no impetus or reason for them to do that, because it's a lie. That's not their job, basically. And that's why I always come back to, well, we fundamentally have a political crisis, because if you put a council of 10 people or a king or council of 500 people, whatever, you randomly elect people, which I believe as well would be better if you just randomly elected people out of a hat, because the odds are the majority of them would just be normal people. Only in our liberal democratic financialized system would it actually select for the greatest traitors and liars among you and give them money and position to spin the wheel in front of you and just take the piss. And that's what we're doing. So it's just depressing to read, you kind of go, oh my God, it comes down to that. So anyway, he says, what we are experiencing in Ireland is actually a problem of affluence. I could just go on and on. I hate it. But this idea that our economy is doing great. It's is the economy in the room with us? Is the affluence in the room? Where's the affluence? Introduce me to the affluence. And some people are doing great, by the way. I don't begrudge someone who's doing very well, earning lots, got a good business, something like that. Necessarily. But of course, that's a minority, especially within the age demographic I'm talking about. Most people are totally fucked, and they can't, in some sense, they can't have kids. They don't have a house. That's a society that's failed. It's not that society is doing great via our macro economy, and the housing problem is a wart on that we should sort out. It's that's totally the wrong metric. The metric is, can people have lives, communities, stability, home ownership, thus have children, thus form a proper country, and the rest of it. And then after that, you go, how's the economy doing, by the way? The macro economy. So it's all upside down. But again, this guy goes into a blithe kind of justifying it all. Oh, it's just a problem of affluence. It's just a minor hiccup of affluence. Overall, it's great. And there's just a huge amount of money chasing homes. Partly this is because of Ireland's economic good news story, full employment, rising real wages, tax cuts, etc. And we certainly wouldn't want those things to change. Okay, so just, yeah, the real solution is to say, actually, yes, we want employment. Yes, we want good things. But if those things are in conflict, which they don't need to be, but if we're meant to believe that they are, with a normal society, homes that are affordable for most people, people buying them in their 20s, having children, having security, not being burdened by a mortgage until the day they die and beyond, sucking everything out of them. Actually, we should aim at as much as possible. We can't have free houses and rainbows and lollipops, but what we want is it to be as little of a suck on people's lives as possible. That'd be ideal. At the end of the day, it's a big item, 4 walls and a roof and all that, yeah. But we want to actually, think about it this way. I'm going into utopian mode here, but just as a thought experiment. If you could provide everyone of childbearing age with a free house, or if it's not free, it's what we're familiar with, compared to what we're familiar with. If it's not free, it's very doable. No big deal. You save up for a few years, you get some state-backed loan thing with reasonable interest, and you spend the next 15 years paying it off. Something that compared to what we have now is much a smaller order issue, right? Much more comparable to an expensive car or something like that than just this absolute life suck burden, right? I don't think with modern technology and with the added value of the internet and AI and everything else that's happened in the last 50 years, that should actually be that crazy an idea, that these things would be handled by the state to be more sensible. If that were the case, think of the different texture of society, communities, neighbors, families, intergenerational stuff, extra kids, stability, a sense of sort of belonging and all of that. Different literal facial expression on people when they're out, because they think, well, I have to save my money for my weekly, my monthly stuff. I'll save up for something nice if I want to, or if I need to fix this or that or replace things or whatever. I can do that, but it's in hand because I don't have this absolute fucking monster on my back. And in many cases, they don't even have the monster on their back of mortgage or rent. They just don't even they can't even approach the situation, right? Think of like the effect of that is massive. So for me, the idea that, yeah, well, actually, maybe Ireland's so-called economic good news story, maybe it needs to be interrupted, because I don't believe that it's just some good thing. So anyway, he also notes that some of the demand is being driven by government incentive schemes. So he's saying schemes and the little technicalities and all that are driving the demand. So is this his stoner theory about people needing homes leading to demand for homes. So just a complete punt, a complete fuck you, in my opinion. After themselves having stated how bad the problem is. Like, again, it's not, housing crisis, housing is a bit mad or whatever. Catastrophic. And I say that it's not even captured by the discourse. I can't do it justice. I sit here and I feel like I'm failing to do it justice. It's just not capturing how bad it is. If you do not have your childbearing years, which is defined by this 25 to 39, right? If none of them can own a house effectively, then you're just done. You're just, as a society, a nation state, a ethnicity, a polity, whatever you want to call it, you are just done. And that is why one of the things that bothers me about the boomer thing. Some boomers are great. They didn't make the situation the way it is. I get all that. But the idea that for the few people who do get a house or rent or have kids or whatever, who kind of like plow through the situation, that a lot of boomers, and I've been nice enough to caveat for the good ones and they're not responsible and all this, but let's just be real. This kind of like nice feelings, you can't talk about it. Keith Woods did an article about gerontocracy and all of that. It's like, you have to be able to talk about it. People say, no, let's all just get along and fight the system or whatever. But it's like, look, you can't do that. If someone wants to do a critique of millennials have no like practical skills, and they thought the world was going to be like some la la land and blah blah blah. If someone has a critique of millennials, it's relevant, it's fact based, it's observationally true. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, even if a lot of the critique is pointed like in a way that I'm going, it's kind of me a little bit. Whatever. I mean, look, if it's true, it's true. Certain bits aren't true. Discuss it away. Fine. This idea, this kind of wall that gets put up of like, oh no, well, don't be talking about us. Don't be talking about boomers. It's like, I'm not just, and me and all the others, people under 40 or whatever, we're not just waking up in the morning finding a scapegoat for the crack. We are seeing what's going on around us. We are looking at data. This stuff is sort of measurable and objective and experience-based as well. Across the board, it's true. It's not true for me. Irrelevant. Across the board, it's true. And my point being is that, and the whole idea that it comes back to, oh, well, we this and we that, and I had an orange for Christmas when I was 4 or whatever. It's like, can we just kind of step over that? Like, I'm not talking about it because I am my age, and so I'm the aggrieved party. I'm personally, I like to think that I'm above that stuff, right? About saying, well, what about my situation? Let me just focus on my thing. It's really beyond that. You're talking about the childbearing generation being totally up shit creek, like end of a nation, end of a polity, end of a society. And it's happening in front of our very faces. And in general, so I happen to be like in that age group. But I'm not complaining. I've loads to complain about, but like overall doing okay actually. So I'm really not being personal. It's just objective. And then on the other hand, you have boomers who bought their houses, generally got set up nicely, bought the houses pretty cheap, and a lot of them were in social housing, and they bought it and they slapped an extension on it and they went on good few holidays and they worked a fairly standard job. They go, I worked all my life. It's like, what did you work at? Were you like a sea rescue person, or did you invent the internet or something? Like, you just kind of like, if you broke your back on a work site or something, yeah, I get that. But like most people, they just worked. It's like saying I went to school for 12 years or whatever. It's like, I know, yeah, but kind of everyone does that. Like, I mean, you didn't do something mad unique. Like, you just kind of went through the motions for the most part. And you're in whatever income you ended up with, even a humble one, in a lot of cases, in one income. You know the story here. Bought a house, grand out, big garden, all the rest of it, no hassle. And the other thing as well, this is a common critique people make. I know I'm just boomer bashing, but you'll see it on TikTok a lot and people talk about it, that, and you might recognize it from your own life. A lot of boomers were, when they were raising their kids, had like their own parents and then aunts and uncles and all that. They were all stumping up. They were all taking the kids for a week at a time. They were doing all this kind of stuff. Whatever the name of the people who were boomers' parents, were very society based. They very much rode in on the idea that our children must get set up, must get houses, must get help with their kids because it takes a village and all of that stuff. We're not sort of these atomized entities. They're not just not my problem. Actually, we're all connected to each other and we've a responsibility to like foster success and well-being on behalf of our unborn grandchildren or born grandchildren and their children. There is a continuity there. It's not just this like, you're 18, you're out of the house, I'm retired, I'm off in my own world, this not my problem. It wasn't like that, and they were kind of raised into that world a little bit. And now on the other end, they're doing fantastically well in general, and there is a sense of like, we're off in our own different country here. Like the private healthcare, the swanning around, hanging out, probably some investments, making money off this whole system effectively, and just kind of seeing, like, being blithe and ambivalent about the whole thing for the most part. And if you talk to them, if you say it is a bit of a disaster, it's kind of tough going, I say they, I'm generalizing for the sensitive people, a lot of them will get the ick. I don't know if you're familiar with the ick, but it's the kind of thing like when it's a joke. I mean, do I need to explain? Women will joke online about, oh, my boyfriend did this and I got the ick. So we were on a bus and the bus stopped and he fell over, which is very unmasculine and like turned me off him and just made me see him as like weak or whatever. And I just got the ick and now I just don't look at him the same way, They kind of just are totally repulsed by weakness or something like that. And I see a lot of it in boomers. It's like the conversation could be given out about this or that or the other, standard kind of like issues of the day. And then when you say, God, it's pretty crazy, like, it's kind of gotten a lot worse. And it's like there is an allergic reaction. They kind of don't want to. They're just like, oh yeah, well, look over there, it's sunny. And it is a bit like that. It's just one of those things. Anyway, maybe I'm just now giving out, but maybe a lot of people tend to like it though. Someone I bumped into, if you're watching, hello, but someone I bumped into the other week who was like, said hello, introduced himself to me, said, oh, you're Gerald, whatever. And I had a quick chat with him. It was funny. He goes, I don't know how boomers came up into the conversation, but he goes, I share your issue on boomers, and so I do think it goes down well, but I don't want to be red meat either. And a lot of you are boomers too, and I love you all. But it's a serious, it's one of these dividers, and it's the same. Again, go on Archiving Irish Diversity, scroll up, just key search boomer, something like that. He goes through the voting trends of last year's election, and economic stuff as well. Is that 2/3 of people in Ireland are doing as well or better than they were last year or previous years. And a lot of us will look at that and go, whoa, where are you getting that from? Like, are you some hotshot business person or what? Where are you getting this like How are you fighting back against the cost of everything or whatever? And a lot of it is just boomers. The population skews from about 40 upwards, much bigger than the population below. So naturally, by definition, the term boomer, right? Baby boomers. There was a lot of them made. And so a lot of them are kind of doing well through asset inflation and the fact that a lot of the things that have gotten expensive housing costs and all of that, they have theirs. It's grand. They might even have a second one. So they're, doing better. A lot of people, the average 30-year-old is looking and go, how is this? This can't be a real statistic, is it? But it's like, no, it is real, because past a certain age and of a certain demographic, they actually are. It's hard to believe, but actually it is the case for a lot of them. And the same demographic will vote religiously for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. When you tell them of the woes, you bitch and moan to them about what's going on, for both yourself personally, but for your generation, eyes glaze over, not interested. I worked all my life, la 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 la. And they'll go out and push the button for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, because the whole system, the predatory system of some shitty house costing €500,000, or some average house costing €500,000, there's another side to that ledger where, oh yeah, all that money goes somewhere, because that, like, the bricks and mortar isn't really worth that. It's the supply demand squeeze. And ultimately you might say, well, you pay the money to the person you buy the house off. That's true. In many cases will be a boomer. But secondly, you, for the most part, take out a mortgage on that, and you'll pay hundreds of thousands on a house like that, hundreds and hundreds of thousands in just interest. So it's just asset, it's just credit. So that credit comes from somewhere. It comes from the bank. The bank isn't actually a asset holder of its own. It's just investors, pension funds, private ones, and then big, huge international investors, big entities, billionaires, you name it, are just hoovering all that up. And so the system has no incentive to change. And that would be fine if, in a democracy, all the people in the society were getting equally fucked by that dynamic. If it was just some big, fat, huge billionaire, ever larger, in the distance somewhere, we could all say, we're going to vote to change it. We're all going to culturally stand and unite together and say, we're not going to all be one big slave plantation here. Whatever mechanism we have, we will use, voting or otherwise, to stop that. The problem is that we have a problem in-house, right? And I say in-house, Ireland domestically, but not just domestically, because there's a lot of foreigners here in that too. I'm talking about within the Irish nation, right? What we know as Ireland, Irish people within Ireland. If you call that the house, we have a problem in-house, because there is a perverse incentive for those people, upwards of 50, boomers, whatever. It's not just some big faraway billionaire. They have their own perverse incentive to enjoy the fruits of their labor, because I worked all my life or whatever. And the fact that it is off the wall, out of balance with the holistic society, which is that, like, well, no, if anything, kind of, and I'm not trying to put like grannies and granddads in the corner, deprived or whatever. I'm not saying that, but traditionally, babies don't have lots of money because they're babies. They get looked after to a basic, decent, comfortable extent, right? They don't need, strictly speaking, they don't need expensive items, right? And old people, traditionally, I'm saying, were looked after by the mid-generation, my age and around there. And they would sort of, basically the group that were in power effectively were the people around between like 25, 45, somewhere there. They were the ones who kind of society depended on to be the workhorse. And thus they held on to a lot of the assets, or at least they were comfortable. They were able to acquire assets, be strong, and maybe they would look after the boomers. Whereas what we have now is a situation where the boomers have it all, and it's incumbent on them to help politically and personally, whatever, to help look after. It's kind of flipped. But the problem is the boomers, in a lot of cases, aren't really doing that. They don't see it as their duty. It's irrelevant. They're doing grand. Sure, I did my thing. Why don't they do their thing? And just not kind of seeing it, don't want to see it. And that's a problem. I'll give you, this is turning into a boomer stream, but I'll give you an example, is that and it's just a Twitter thing, but it is reflective of like the reality I would have in conversations in life and stuff. I put up a tweet a few months ago and I said, in theory, you could have a situation where you have someone commuting from Sligo to Dublin or something for work. This is a hypothetical sort of extreme example, but it's illustrative. You could have someone who commutes from Sligo to Dublin for work, and it breaks their heart because it's a long slog of a commute. And they could have kids, let's say. So they have kids, they commute to Sligo for work. They go 3 days a week or something like that. It's a hard slog. Then they come back, they look after the kids, change the dishwasher, whatever it is, right? It's kind of bleak enough, like overloaded life, like things that were not happening back in the day. People didn't have to do these things. And they're on their own. No village, no family, no huge network, village support, that type of thing. And they might even be dislocated. They might not be from Sligo. They're actually from Dublin, right? But they've ended up out there in order to be able to live or something. I don't know. Anyway, they're out there living that life. And it turns out that they actually live renting a house. And the person who owns the house is a boomer who owns a handful of houses. Not a major portfolio landlord, but they own like 3 or 4, a bit of a muckety-muck around the town or whatever, And they go around eating cakes in hotels, given out to the Brazilian waitress because it's not creamy or fresh enough, and go on the cruise and drive around in a 252 and all the rest of it. And because, of course, they make a lot, decent money from a certain number of houses and their little investment fund and pension fund and blah, blah, blah. And they bought their own houses when they were cheap. The whole story, right? You have that type of boomer. And I know not all are like that. But you have one of them who is the landlord of this person who commutes to Dublin. And what you have is a situation where you, as the person who commutes from Sligo, you could actually be at the train platform and your train to just to go up and be milked, basically, for your life value, like where it gets sucked out by the landlord, gets sucked out by cost of living, the wages don't rise, you have to commute. And in order to just go and be milked effectively, you actually have to pay, I don't know what it is for train tickets now, but you have to pay like 30, 40, 50 euro return, something like that, if you factor in all of it, daily to just commute, which is, in times we have now, that's kind of hard going, right? But you have to do that. And then you look over, you have to do that in order to get to Dublin, to get the money to pay to this landlord boomer. And then you look down the platform as you're on your way to work and you see that your man is there in his blazer and your one in her kind of flowery boomer blouse. They're standing there with their hat on and their suitcases. They're going up for a trip to Dublin. God bless them, right? But the weird bit about that is that in such a gerontocratic, bizarre sort of circumstance there, the person who's paying 40 euro for their ticket looks down at the boomers who are getting on the train and have a free travel pass. And they realize that I'm paying for my ticket and I'm paying for his ticket as well. Naturally, right? That kind of doesn't make sense to me. My argument on Twitter was to say it should be means tested. If there's a boomer who's very poor or cannot afford it, or they don't even have to be very poor, but if their means are such that that beyond a minimal amount of transport they would kind of be limited, you go, that's fine. Give them a travel pass in their old age, but past a certain age, let's just say we'll redistribute that travel pass for that. We'll basically give it from that boomer landlord to that person who's commuting. Clearly, they're raising 3-4 kids, struggling away, already paying the landlord. Wouldn't it make more sense that they go for free and the landlord, boomer, who has lots of money, who could easily afford the train ticket, buys his train ticket, and she goes free, he goes free, whatever. I made that kind of example, and a lot of them went apoplectic in the replies, saying, we earned it, I got an orange for Christmas when I was, you name it, the grab bag of excuses. They said everything. Oh, well, I don't know, is it practical bureaucracy or whatever? And I was saying, I know, but just in principle, and they wouldn't accept it. I was saying, so you're telling me that in principle, putting aside all the caveats, in principle, you think it's right that would happen. Not a version of that scenario, but that literal scenario. And a lot of them said, yeah, I do, actually. He's entitled to it. The same people who say, oh, these young people are very entitled or whatever, they were saying he's entitled to it. Oh, they want handouts, they want free houses, they want this and that and the other. And they went, I worked for it, I'm entitled to it. And it's kind of like, it's actually an abstract idea that you worked for it. Like realistically, like it's all an abstraction. It's the same as a college student saying, I should have free rent and I should be given a free car or something because, I'm entitled to it or whatever. There's no real difference, right? They go, well, I'm old and I lived a while. So because I'm me and I'm old and that's my worldview, I earned it or something. It's like, well, not really. Like it's all, to my mind, it would be just logical. You would say, if I were in that position, I'd say my instinct, my intuition straight away, if someone brought that up to me and I were 65, I would say, hey, in principle, sure. I mean, totally. I mean, I want someone who's raising a few kids and struggling away. And if I'm not struggling, then sure. I'm not going to get hung up on the principle. The fact that it wasn't even about the need, they were just saying, in principle, I want that. And even if you said, well, what about it's just free for all of them? So they'd straight away turn around and kind of go, well, that's just a bit entitled and that's a utopia or something. You go, you just can't deal with that. Like, it's very hard to get through to them on like, actually, we just need to, through a lot of different mechanisms, it's not about taking from people and being nasty or resenting people or whatever. It's just or me being my age, colored by my own perspective. The fact is, any society, some tribe in Africa, it doesn't matter. Any society, any social structure requires you to get the agency, the resources, and all of that in society to an inordinate extent, like to disproportionately into the hands of the people who are in the midst of having children. So that could be housing, that could be just the like I say, the juice, the surplus value, the goods, whatever. You kind of need to get that into their hands. And it's not so that, so they can go off and have cruises and go eat cakes all day or whatever. No, so that they can get a roof over their heads, live, not be totally shackled by like a lack of financial freedom. They need to be able to do their thing. And then they will start to have kids, they will mix, they'll form communities, they'll effectively build the future and all the rest of it. And it's a complicated story, but that's kind of an obvious thing. If you don't have the people who hold all the power democratically, they vote hardcore for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And what we see is that the younger demographic is outmatched by them numbers wise anyway. And even at that, the young people aren't voting. People under 35 or whatever, eligible to vote are like 70% of them or something like that. Just they don't bother, disengaged, completely disengaged, because they've nothing to. It's like they're not in a society. They're busy, kind of too busy for it. They don't follow RTE so much, and they just feel like the whole thing is fake. They're checked out. There is no society for them to feel like they're really in, and thus they don't kind of care to or think of going to a ballot box. And also the society is rigged where you don't have an equal option where, hey, if you want to vote Fine Gael, if that's your cup of tea, cool. And if you want to vote for some sort of radical different like a party that wants to shake it all up and whatever, that party isn't there because that party would be persecuted off the face of the earth by the state anyway, and would be made to look marginalized. People say, the right is always hamstringing itself by being weird and being fringe and all this. It is designed that way. Some of it is self-inflicted, but I don't believe in self-defeat theory or whatever. I think that's overblown. You have, those parties are marginalized. They're attacked. The activists are attacked. People like me and everyone else, take Phil Dwyer, anyone, like any of the voices or the parties or whatever, you are fighting an uphill battle with like arrows being fired at you constantly, and that's by design. So it's not like you go out and you have this very fair open access to the information and all of it. You can vote Fianna Fáil. So on the people that the young people need to be voting for are sort of driven out of existence, basically. And the people that the old people need to be voting for their self-interest, to enrich themselves and do well and keep it all going. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are there on a plate. They're on the paper, they're on the telly, they're this, they're that. The local Gombeen, Cynthia Ní who speaks our Irish, and she was in the Eurovision, she gets groomed to be Fine Gael, so there's Gráinne Seoige and all the rest of them. So all the smiley, nice people or whatever are drafted into that, and then they're beamed at you constantly. So it's just, the thing is kind of rigged. So effectively, and it comes back to that gerontocracy thing, is that you have this completely mismatched society. Boomers are effectively more comfortable than is sort of natural within a society, to be honest, especially relatively to the young people. And then, so that's that anyway. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off too much on them, but like, it is a serious systemic issue. the thing between the average boomer, average generalizing, who is 62 or whatever, and the Irish person who is 27. So they're on the cusp, you know. They're not young anymore. They ought to be making moves. They ought to be getting serious. They ought to be, or they're at least thinking about, well, I'm pushing on now. Am I going to have kids? Am I going to buy a house? What's going on? The person who's in that position with what's in front of them, it is, sometimes say it's like two different countries. It's like two different planets, and they're completely disconnected from each other. For the most part, the boomers do not see it as their problem or something to do with them, because ultimately, if you were to fix things up a bit for the 27-year-old, it is a bit of a zero-sum game. That some of these pensions and whatever, a lot of that comfort would have to be kind of reined in a little bit. To some extent, that's kind of baked in. And so no interest in that. Just no interest. And so we can talk about like investors and gumbeans and immigrants and all that stuff. That's all part of the structure. But if within your own house, within your own nation state, you have within the family, effectively, you have such a dysfunctional dynamic, it's very hard to contend with those outsiders, the investors, the EU, the foreigners, whatever. It's very hard to say, well, how are we going to address these huge problems when we have such a dysfunctional household, so to speak, nationally? And that's why I get kind of annoyed when I try to bring it up. It's not just about beating up on boomers or just like tarring them all with the same brush. It's not, but it's like, it's an objective systemic thing. We have to talk about that. We have to be able to talk about it. We have to be able to do that. And what happens is boomers will defend each other left, right, and center and do all the same things of like, let's just look at the power structure. Let's not talk about that. It's like, we kind of have to talk about that or we're not going anywhere. And because the government can always come back to, well, you know, the economy is doing great. And it's like, who in the domestic population is the economy doing great for? The top 1 or 2% across all ages, people who are just doing very well, very successful, true. But on a grand level, on the big numbers, who does the economy, when they hear the economy is doing great, they say, great, that I recognize that, that's good for me. And who has the opposite feeling? It is age split for the most part. So anyway, so yeah, that's the end of that article. So I'll fly through some more stuff. Yeah, Keith on this. 93% of Irish aged 25 to 39 don't own a home. They're emigrating in their thousands while birth rates collapse. Basically summing up everything I went on about nice and quickly, actually. While birth rates collapse and the government adds 3% per year of the population with immigration. About 70% of eligible voters under the age of 35 don't vote, and boomer votes are enough to prop up the establishment. Gerontocracy is destroying the country. Thanks for actually nice and briefly summing up everything I was going on about there. I hadn't realized that going into it. Yeah, Last True Gael had a stream on Telegram, and Archiving Irish Diversity is talking about it too in more detail. But that is effectively the story of the day to me. That is the problem. And I don't know how we sort that out. A conversation needs to be had. Somehow the power brokers in society, domestically, not the big outsiders, the billionaires or whatever, but like within our own house, we all need to sit down, the boomers, us, the kids, everyone needs to sit down and go, lads, we need to work together here, okay? I know you're doing really well, but we kind of need your help. Personally, politically, economically, across the board, we're dying out here. We're dying out here, and we need you to like wake up. We need you to care, because we can't do it without you, effectively. So it's more just a plea, as far as I'm concerned. So Barry White, not the singer, but the journalist. This is people, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, sleeping out overnight. It's heartbreaking, to buy homes at 7 Mills. So 7 Mills is somewhere in Dublin, somewhere by Lucan. It's a big patch of undeveloped land that sort of got built around by the urban sprawl of Dublin over the decades, and for whatever reason wasn't developed. One of these like little patches. And Kieran Homes, this big housing company, got the contract to build it up, or bought it, or building it up. And they are building these sort of Dino box, like A-rated, like cookie cutter modern houses with tiny little gardens and all the rest of it. And packing them up to the gills with Indians, basically, versus like a small few Irish people and charging a fortune for them. That's basically what's going on there. That's the gig. And the people, in order to get the right to be able to spend $500,000 on one of these things, you have to queue up like a bum, basically, like a kid trying to get the latest Harry Potter book, like Charlie trying to find the golden ticket. And that's not the golden ticket for, if you queue long enough and you score, you'll get a house for free. No, it's just to be able to buy it at the extortionate price and live next to like Indians for the rest of your life. You have to queue up and hope to get selected or be at the top of the queue. That's what's going on. Queuing since 3 p.m., people queuing with their kids, and TLDR, if you look at the queues, it's almost all foreigners in all of these images, which is something, again, we're back to boomers a little bit, because there's a lot of boomers who live in certain towns or parts of suburbs and cities and all that are sort of mature areas in every sense, that they were built a while ago. The inhabitants are boomers, right? And so the whole thing of like, well, Irish people at a certain age, like Irish, like teenagers now are going to be a minority by the time they're in their mid-20s. Like, it's happening now for them. They're in this other world. You don't even know what their school looks like. You've no idea. You've no idea, if you haven't been for whatever reason, what Talbot Street and Parnell Street look like. If you live in some part of wherever, right, some nice suburb in Cork, or you live in Abbey Leaks or something like that, wherever, you might not actually quite be familiar. Have you been to? I've not been to Adamstown, so I've only seen the reports. But that's how easy it is. I get around the place, and I haven't. Sometimes you miss these things. So there's like different little silos in the country, and if you're in a certain one, you actually don't know what it looks like. I had the experience in the last year or two of ending up in the A&E of a not great public hospital, and it was just like something from Karachi. Like, it was kind of bedlam. It was grim. It was glum. No one was listening. All the doctors and nurses were foreign. No one gave a shit, to be honest. Like, it was just it looked like something from the third world. Like, not just the people, but the vibe, the look of the place, all overcrowded and just grim, right? And I been in a private hospital too. And again, there were a lot of boomers disproportionately there, a very nice private hospital. And I walked in and I just thought, this place is so nice. Like, it's like a hotel, it's nice. And it just dawned on me that, okay, yeah, if you are a 252 electric car driving boomer who goes for cruises and, eats scones or whatever, and this is your hospital that you end up going to, and you live in a leafy enough sort of mature suburb, so not a lot of houses in the last 20 years have been bought or sold at all for a good distance around you, and you don't really travel around that much domestically. Like, you don't go to places that you don't belong. Like, if you've no reason to go to Adamstown, you've no reason to be on Talbot Street, that kind of thing. Your picture of Ireland would be very different from a lot of people. From, for example, these poor sods, the few Irish who are tucked in with these. So they're tucked in with a load of Indians and other foreigners, and they're being asked to pay extortionate prices for these houses. Different worlds, totally different worlds. And so until you somehow broach that issue, we're sort of in a bad place. Here, Michael McCarthy, I was going to call him Michael Murphy there for a second. This is my name, I suppose. But yeah, Michael McCarthy, big TikToker, great content creator, put up this video here. And it's, again, a queue, right? Now, for anyone who cares, I earlier put this on 0.25 speed, just to slow it down and have a look. And I actually did like a tally to try to count like how many are foreign, how many are Irish. And again, it's not an exact science. Depends how you define these things and all that. But like, if we're going by like someone who looks like they could plausibly be Irish, ethnically Irish, descendant from here, and someone who's quite clearly foreign extraction, if you count that, I got far enough, and then it was kind of unclear or whatever. But what I was getting was like, what did I have here up to a certain point? I had 5, 10, 15, 18, and then I had two potential Irishes. So that's what we're talking about. Like, you know, take a look for yourself. Almost every last one of them. Like, I don't know if boomers would give a shit or whatever, but I think a lot of them, if you brought them down to that, like, and just took them off the RT and showed them that, they would sort of be stunned, you know. They don't, a lot of them, to be fair, don't kind of, someone says, I feel like I'm losing the plot. That's me too, yeah. Um, like, I don't know if some of them realize it or want to realize it, but it's like, you're not talking about a housing crisis or there's a bit of immigration or something. You're talking, I just don't have the words for it, like to describe what this is. Like, it is a full wipeout. And it's not just like, oh, it's a wipeout of the Gaelic Irish race and Padraig Pearse and Chucky Garlon, all this. I don't mean to like belittle that, but it's kind of like, even if you're not attached to that kind of heritage stuff, just as a human situation, you know what I mean? It's like, that is a radical situation. Like, that's not happening in China. It's not happening in India. It's not happening in Indonesia like, and it's not happened historically anywhere. This is not just some situation. This is not just, we have low cost airlines now and the internet, so things are changing. This is like a systematic wipeout. I'm reluctant to use an ethnic cleansing, genocide. People are sensitive about those terms. It's a intentional wipeout for whatever benefit, for gerontocracy, for global oligarchy. I don't know exactly, a mix of these things, but it is the full on just destruction of society, destruction of what we know as Irish society. And the victims ultimately are not just Irish people, because the boomers are grand. They'll sail out the rest of their life grand. The absolute victims are the people who are, like the stats said, 25 to 39, and anyone under them who's facing into that. And then their children, the few who do have children, you know, are growing up in this sort of like nomadic, you know, denationalized zone. Um, eh, and it's all, one of the things that crossed my mind is like, if someone was in a queue there for the houses, this is the future, the people buying up all these new houses, new Ireland for all, right? If you're in that queue and you say to yourself, or you say to your friend, I'm in the queue for the house here, I'm hoping I get the golden ticket or whatever to buy my 500 grand like Dino box, my like sort of CAD house. Um, the place is full of foreigners. Everyone here is a foreigner. There's a weird kind of contradiction there where it's almost like, here's a grim reality. You kind of go, are you sure? Who's the foreigner really like? You know, as in like, maybe turn that mirror back on yourself and kind of face up to it. You're the foreigner, right? And there's probably more, in not just more foreigners than Irish people in that crowd, but there's probably more of the constituent nationalities. There's probably more Chinese than Irish. There's probably a bigger block. There's probably more Indians than Irish, this, that, and the other. So if anything, you're the sort of fourth largest population group or something in here. So like, you know, putting aside romantic nationalism, my ancestors are buried here, it's my birthright, Padraig Pearse quotes and all that. Yes, and I believe that, right? We have to believe that. But in a sort of a cold way, just a cold, objective way, they're foreigners by what metric? You know, that's a kind of a sad reality. Um, it's sort of like, you're speaking about it like it still is your country and you still are in control, you know. Um, and that's just something that like you're not going to hear on RTE. They don't just say that this is happening. If you're watching RTE, the Late Late Show, you will have Mary McAleese Mary Kennedy, Pat Short singing the Breakfast Roll song, and you have the chorus playing Runaway, and Dustin the Turkey, and they don't really know. They're not told. None of us are really told. It's just happening. So I find that just kind of like something I just can't put my words on. I can't do it justice. I just can't. This is a radical scenario we're in. 6% home ownership, and how many, and everyone queuing up for this new Ireland for all. Do you notice as well, like Vodafone, broadband for all, these kind of like private companies, because this is the new rhetoric across corporate and state sort of channels. This whole idea that Ireland for all, like it is totally intentional. The slogans, the housing, the plan is all totally intentional. People say, is it a Jewish plot? Is it a globalist plot? Is it this? Is it that? Is it the financial elite? Is it the banks? Is it the boomers? That's a story for another day, let's say, but like it is a plot. Okay, this isn't happening just by inertia or entropy or something like that. It is all painfully, chillingly intentional. That is the country, the state, the sovereign we're living under, whatever the fuck it is. It's not Simple Simon, Leo the Leak, and all this stuff. They're just actors or whatever. I don't know what the fuck it is, country we're living in, and what our government, state, ruler, king. None of us, and I do this like a lot. I don't really know what it is, but it's wiping us out, and it's not just wiping, again, like I say, wiping us out our like Irish heritage and all this stuff. It is that, but it's like it's wiping us out as people. Like you'll have someone who's like Irish and they're in their 30s, and they're absolutely at their wits' end. They either have a house, don't have a house, they're living in their parents, they're broke, they're stressed, they're falling apart, right? They're totally alienated. They're Travis Bickle mode, just walking around the place. And it's sort of like, put aside the romantic nationalism, that person is just being broken on the wheel of this thing. You know, just as a human being, they are being absolutely crushed to smithereens. You know, and then it's also the nation as well. It's like it's a humanitarian crisis effectively, and Irish people are at the butt of it. It's just like, I'm not trying to disconnect it from nationalism. I'm just trying to give an idea of like the human individual toll. Yeah, just at an objective level is just off the fucking wall, and that's why it is hard to see the boomer thing. You don't begrudge people doing well. You don't want to, but it's like on the other side of the fence, you have these people who are happy to vote Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, ignore complaints, talk about how they worked all their lives, live in totally different worlds. There was an ad I was watching. I love bank ads, mortgage ads, right? And it was a woman, she's with her parents, and they live in a nice leafy, probably Dublin suburb, sort of well-built houses, spacious gardens, all that kind of stuff. And the street itself has big mature trees, oaks or whatever they are, right? Like big, like gnarled up, old trees. Thick trees lining the road, like a suburb we all would have grown up in, maybe. And she's in her parents' house on a laptop on the mortgage calculator, stressed looking, trying to figure out a house. And then she discovers the AIB app, and everything gets bright. And then suddenly she's outside in her parents' street, and she's spinning around in old dowdy clothes, and it goes from grey to bright. And then the scene switches from her parents' suburb to like one of these Seven Mills looking places. And it's sort of like this new build kind of CAD looking place. And her clothes change into nicer clothes. She looks prettier. Her hair is done as she spins it. That's all whirls. It all happens as she's like getting the mortgage approval on her app. And then she breathes and she looks up and the camera pans to the sky. And it's like, okay, so that's the implicit transformation. You go from this Irish, mature, spacious, largely state-built, non-predatory housing situation to this new Ireland for all. And what it doesn't say in the ad is that all her neighbours are going to be Indian and African and whatever else. And they might be grand people as individuals, but like none of us really signed up to that. To be the most foreign group in our neighborhood, where they're actually, if you're in a neighborhood of 300 people, there might be 20 Irish houses, but there's 60 Indian houses. So they're tribed up, right? They hang out with each other, they speak to each other, have their own way and stuff. So if anything, the hegemonic kind of force within that neighborhood might be Indian or whatever else, and you're just sort of awkwardly standing on, it's a nightmare. I'll get onto another thing. Layman's Take here on Twitter. I've said this before myself to some extent, but he summed it up nicely. Is the problem that this creates is what I like to call Irish flight, right? The connotation there, white flight, whatever. Is that you have, I'll just quote him here, a grim reality of the housing crisis nobody is talking about is that an ever increasing number of young Irish people don't want to live in the new build housing estates like this. Pause, my own commentary here. I know I don't. It's not even about, you could say, what if the foreigners in that housing estate were individually lovely people, well-to-do, respectful, they take out their bin, they put it back, they say hello in the morning and all that. And some of the Irish neighbours in an alternative neighbourhood are a bit scaldy, some of them are a little bit rough and this and that. I'd still be going to the Irish place. And I don't need to justify that to some technocrat or whatever. That's just how it is. I could break it down, the human psychology that goes into that or whatever. Just is what it is. It's normal, natural. But anyway, the Layman's Take at the Layman's Take on Twitter goes on and says, even if you get a house, this is going to be your neighbourhood, a random mishmash of 90% foreigners you have nothing in common with. You will not live in Ireland in any meaningful sense. You will live in an identityless multicultural economic zone in ugly, soulless copy-paste houses, mass-produced to fill a quota of a government who hates you and surrounded by people who hate you. And I might differ there slightly. People who hate you, some of them do. A lot of them are apathetic, maybe. There's a pause, there's me talking. There's a disconnect there. It just is what it is. And if they have big numbers, they'll be having their things, their events and their, rapport with each other, and you're just kind of not part of that. It's a very strange feeling. I lived on Mountjoy Square for a while, and I can tell you that there'd be like Roma gypsies, there'd be Brazilians, there'd be all these other people. And if there were no Irish people in the park, and this wasn't just me, I have pretty good perception on this stuff, I'd go in, or we'd go in, and I would sense a kind of almost like an awkwardness, because you're the only Irish person there. And, an Irish person would go in and go, this is pretty fucking weird. Like, everyone's foreign, and it's almost like if everyone in that park is foreign, they can all say, hey, we're all different from each other. It sort of is a bit of a patchwork of foreigners. We'll just keep to ourselves and do our own thing and whatever. But when you come in, you're sort of the different foreigner, because you're the foreigner who both you and they know that until very recently, this was your country. And they know that you probably in your mind are thinking, this is kind of my country. This is weird. And so that sort of awkwardness cuts both ways a little bit. And it's almost like you're disrupting the new Irish a little bit by even just your presence, because it's sort of like on paper, on the media, you're not supposed to talk about it, but you and they know what's going on here. It's sort of implicitly understood. It's weird. I'll give you one other example. People who think I'm, like critics would say, I'm just imagining this. I'm obviously not. I was in Fitzgerald's Park when I was last in Cork. I brought my kids there. It was a lovely experience, and it is a great park, right? Now I'm just riffing and going on. I'm entertaining myself here now, but I should just stop. But anyway, I was in Fitzgerald's Park, which is very meaningful for me because it was the first time I'd actually brought my children there. It was very sunny, lovely day, beautiful park still. And again, bear in mind, foreigners who are in the park, I'm not going around saying they're all bad or anything. So most of them are grand. There wasn't a big mass shooting, or I'm not trying to be dramatic, but I'll just talk about it for what it was. I went to that park because I spent the first portion of my life living in Cork City. and I would be taken to, because we didn't have like, we weren't in Disneyland or we weren't rich or far from it, right? So I was brought in spare time to either Cork City Library, and I would just read books, look at books, whatever. I was young, or Fitz Park, and I would just run around the park. Two free things you could do. So those are my most cherished early memories, is two of those places, and just Cork in general. So I'm in Fitz Park. It's sunny, and I'm with my own children. My eldest, who is approaching the age of which I can remember, and it was a very special experience. And we had a great time. No one did anything bad. It's fine. But at one point, I'm down by the swings, and I'm pushing my boy in the swing, and whatever had changed in the park, some people had left, and it had reached this kind of critical mass where I sort of suddenly looked around me, and there's like a couple of dozen people around, and I realized that they are all foreign, right? All of them. There might be maybe one or two, like one guy with his kid or something like that, floating around in the distance, but everyone in the immediate vicinity is foreign. And not just that, but they're very foreign, right? Chief among them was a intergenerational family of young children, and then some sort of parents or some extended family, and then at the top you had the patriarch and the matriarch, which were these two old. One was they're Afghani, I imagine, this big fat Afghani woman with all her stuff on, and it's just something off the wall about how they're acting. It's just a different culture. And then the patriarch is this Afghan, I think it's Pashtun probably, man with the like little beanie thing on and a big dyed red beard. I think that's a Pashtun thing, if you've ever seen that, right? Now that's the most, call it Orientalist, but that is about as foreign and like tribal as you can get of a look, right? All the garb and all the rest of it. Definitely not a lick of English between them. They look very fresh off the boat type of vibe. They look, it's basically like I feel like I'm full on in Afghanistan here. This is not some integrated like third generation scientist or whatever. I don't know how the fuck these people got here and what they're doing, but like they're extremely foreign, right? And they're not really up to the, with Irish people in a playground, parents or whatever, there'd be this kind of like courteous, like, how are you getting on? And, oh, I don't want to get in your way, or, oh, do you want to go? Or, this kind of thing. There's this vibe, and they don't get that at all. They put their little kid on the swing. And I'm straight away, I go up and I'm aware, I put my kid on the swing and I think, okay, I'll do a few minutes here and I'll get gone, right? Give everyone a turn or whatever. And they end up putting their kid on the swing, and he's there for ages, right? And they're all gathered around and all yapping across at each other really loud to each other. It's just kind of discomforting to people, that's just their culture, fine. But and then they go away to like the climbing thing with some other kid, and they leave the little young one, who's like just a little toddler, just in the swing. And it's really awkward because they go away, they're kind of a distance away, like kind of shouting distance, over there, busy with the other kid. They've just left the toddler in the swing. So now he's taking the swing that there are a few other kids, because again, I'm conscious of it. I'm trying to be like magnanimous or whatever. That like, excuse me, I can see like a queue. People aren't queuing up, but I can see a guy with his kid over there, and the kid is kind of tugging on him, being like, "Daddy, can I go?" So you're aware of that. And yet they have their kid just sitting on the swing. It's not moving. At this point, it's come to a complete rest, and the kid is just kind of parked there, just kind of staring off into the distance. And they're just going around. They've just left him there, and just little things like that. And then they're shouting and roaring across at each other, basically having conversations from a distance to each other in whatever their language is. And like at one point, my toddler's walking along. I'm kind of walking next to him, and the big fat woman walks along, and she almost, oh no, it's my daughter, who's smaller, much more vulnerable. The woman is kind of walking at her, and I'm giving her a chance to be like, you're gonna like see her, right, and get out of the way. And she actually doesn't. So I have to kind of like get in between the two of them and sort of like protect my daughter. I'm like, this woman isn't even looking. She's just kind of like stomping around the place. Just this weird attitude from them. Anyway, point is, everyone in the park within the vicinity is also foreign. And it dawns on me that I'm not staring and leering. I'm not going Travis Bickle mode on them here. I have sunglasses on. I'm just soaking it all up, right? And these Pashtuns really do stick out, right? And then I also look across at this big Indian family, again, intergenerational or whatever. They're a bit more well-to-do, a bit more, let's say, civilized. But I'm just thinking, well, I'm not the only one who's tribe conscious, right? Like people say, you're far right and you're obsessed or something. We're all human, right? So obviously the Indians are tribe conscious. And of course, Indians and Muslim Afghanis would be very at odds with each other as the sort of people they would be chalk and cheese a little bit, right? And it dawns on me that perhaps this Indian is looking at this kind of like disrespectful Pashtun family stomping around the place. And they're thinking, oh, look at these, or whatever. And then they're also spotting me, and my head just kind of turning, just kind of in disbelief, just kind of seeing it. And I wonder, are these Indians just thinking, oh God, these people are obnoxious, but then kind of looking at me and looking at everyone else who's foreign, and I'm the only Irish person there with my kids, and looking at me thinking, what the fuck must be going through your mind, Irishman? This must be really weird for you. And I kind of feel, and if I'm right on that, the answer would be, because all these conversations have to be silent because we can't have public discourse. My answer would be, I don't know. I don't even have words, I don't know what he's doing here. I don't know what you're doing here. You have India. You can go back to India whenever you want, if that's your thing. You have a country, you have a people, you have a tribe. You have intergenerational families at the playground. Your grandparents, your kids, nephews, nieces, aunts, uncles, and all that, all integrated, all backing each other up and all the rest of it. And our state puts you as first-class citizens and discriminates against me. And I don't have the words to describe it. I'm just broken in a situation like that. I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying my life. You just plow on, ride the tiger and all that. But in terms of everything that's involved in a situation like that, it's very, very fucking hard to take. And a lot of Irish people have that. I've had multiple experiences like that, but I mean, I could tell you ones I've seen. And here's the other thing too, is that when an Irish person arrives, you will also see they'll arrive in with their kid and they'll kind of round the corner enough to see what's happening. And you can see them kind of like, I'm thinking of sunny days where they'll have sunglasses on, which almost emphasizes the strangeness of it. Because you can't see their actual pupils, their eyeballs, their eyes. It's the way their head pivots. They get in and you see them. And because we can't say anything or we're not allowed to, there's this very strange, indescribable body language where they kind of like, you see their kind of head just kind of look around, survey it, and you can just hear their thoughts. And it's just mad. There should be a 14-syllable German word for that, because it's such a complex idea. Yeah, someone says dispossessed. It's like the sense of dispossession and the sense that you can't do anything about it. You can't even talk about it is unbelievable. And especially in a scenario like that where you're with your little children and you just think, you just want to absolutely scream and shout internally. It's like, and it's not even at the foreigners. You know what I mean? They're just are where they are. Like they're following the incentives and whatever. It's kind of like when I'm thinking of that hypothetical Indian mind reading me, I'm like, it's the state, it's the whatever it is we live under. It's like, I don't know, if I was communicating back to him, I'd say, I don't know, man, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? It's bad. And we can't even talk about it. We can't even fucking talk about it. And then meanwhile, while you're in that situation, all these like obnoxious grandparents stomping around the place in like tribal dress or whatever, you're thinking, again, I come back to boomers, you just think they're off somewhere just, strolling around or whatever, doing grand, unaffected by most of this. That is also a hard aspect of it to take. Anyway, I'll go on. What's next here? Another picture, I imagine, of the... Oh yeah, so I just... I had a tweet from a few months ago. So most of these will... So it's the idea that... So like, when the government talks about we're constructing houses and we're doing new houses, the fact is all these houses are in development such as this. There are very few developments where the houses are made of sort of real materials. They're spacious, there's gardens. It's somewhat attainable for people, and almost everyone in there is Irish. And it's basically like a recognizable neighborhood, like a reasonable, not fancy, but recognizable neighborhood to what you grew up in. And it's new. It's part of this new development stuff. So if the government says we built 20 or 30,000 houses this year, you have to bear in mind that all those houses are these India fests. So effectively, in terms of what we would consider housing, we would consider normal, There's none of that. That's done now. That's a finite supply. And like Layman's take there said, it's basically this finite supply, and you'll have like Irish flight of people who just want to grab whatever's left. So you actually have a higher demand curve or like scramble for those houses among the Irish. It's just pathetic. It's sad what's been done to us. It's really, really sad. Excuse me. So Adamstown. So here's I might have played this before on a stream. This is from a while back. So this is not a biased take, right? I'll just explain it to you. What you're about to watch here, I didn't find Indian foreign-y videos from Adamstown, right? I didn't find a little compilation of them and put them together, a selective category or whatever. I just went, as I describe here, I said, out of curiosity, I looked up Adamstown, Dublin for some videos of the place because everyone says it's very Indian or whatever. So I want to look up videos because surely someone's taken some videos or whatever. And what I find is, excluding promo videos from property developers and estate agents, this was all I found. So videos from Irish property real estate agents basically being like, come on into the house. Here we have a sink and here we have spacious wardrobe, whatever. Yeah, he's Irish because he's like doing a promo. And then you have like drone videos, which is an undisclosed user. So it's obviously not a human scenario video. It's just a big drone shot or something. But of videos of someone walking around talking about it, or whatever, who isn't an estate agent showing the interior of a house. This was all I found. There wasn't much. There was like 3 videos. All 3 of them were this, right?
Hello ji, assalamu alaikum. There are lots of Asian in this area, particularly lots of Indians, Pakistani, Bangladeshi. Most of the people have been moving here. And like 3 years ago, the government here announced help to buy scheme as well. So many people have utilized that, which support you in financially in buying the house.
That's the world you're living in, like that. If New Ireland for all. Again, some of these people might be grand or whatever, but that is not some discussion that was had. Nobody wants to live in that. Some Irish people maybe do, liberal, whatever is. Even they, I don't think, do. And it might be the house is much warmer than the older houses, and you can turn on your fridge from fucking when you're on holidays or whatever. You can get get your email your toaster or whatever, but that's all well and good. But think of raising your children in that. It's and it might not even be criminal or dangerous. They might be middle class professionals and all that, but it is just not. That's hell. I do not ever want that. Luckily, I'm not in that for now. But it's very disturbing. It's and the funny thing is, these Indians are making these nice videos. Like one of them, there's a nice sunset, but it's the kind of their music, they're basically enjoying the nice sunset, and God bless them, right? But a lot of these videos too will be put up on their social media to show their buddies in India or wherever. Look at this nice, look how much better this is than India. If you come here, play your cards right, get the cost rent, the help to buy scheme and all that, you could be here. I see why they would do that. But on the flip side of that, we're then lumped into this situation in our own country, our own small little country. Fucking disaster. And for that, you have to pay give your life and soul to pay for it at that. If you're one of the lucky 7% of childbearing age people who actually owns your house, it manages to get one of that's if you're doing very well for yourself. I don't know if I'm just going on here, 550 of you in the chat. This is kind of a different story. I'll race through this. So Blessington, County Wicklow. So on the other end of it, there's the Indians who kind of get tech jobs or whatever it is, and you're living next to them. But then on the other end, for people who are struggling, who can't get a house and all that, but they're still working, you have stuff like this. And the video just kind of describes itself. Just have a watch.
Can't believe it. Look at this house. This is a council house that was given to me, right? And when I asked him, did you buy it? He said, no, I was given by the council. I wanted to see the inside of it. He says, oh, I had to get a big house because I've got 7 children. Where would you? Look, fucking blessing. Look at that for a view. Absolute. Can't believe it.
It's just unreal. Like, I think of all the Irish children that aren't being born, and if someone comes in with their 7 kids who are already, I said this before, but like, someone comes in as an asylum seeker, migrant, dependent, whatever, and they have 7 kids at home, all they have to do is tell, I imagine, I'm assuming this is the case, prove me wrong, they have to tell the social services that, hey, well, yeah, if you're putting me in a house, by the way, I have 7 kids, and they go, where are the 7 kids? You go, they're at home, but I have documentation for them. They intend to come. They're my children after all. Then you have to go straight to the top of the list. You're most needy. You have kids. It's like the same way if I try to get a social house, some single mother with a kid would get it above me. She ranks like higher in priority. She needs to be allocated. They will just look at it and say, well, there's a person here with 7 kids who needs a house, so we have to just pull out the stops, right? They don't say, well, this person's a spoofer. They're not from here. They've no entitlement to it. The bureaucracy doesn't work like that. It just has to sort them, has to prioritize them. So they end up in situations like this. Whereas there's Irish people who would be like, well, I would have more kids, or I would have a kid or anything, but unfortunately I have a job and it doesn't pay for a house. But if I didn't have a job and I was some foreigner with 7 kids, I'd be in this, but I'm not. So, I'll just give you another quick example here. So there was a Romanian man here, a Romanian father of 7. This is just like as egregious as it gets. I hate to just give out, but it's relevant. A Romanian father of 7 who has 64 previous convictions, which I think he racked up in 10 or 11 years since he's been here. 64 previous convictions, and is in receipt of social welfare and child support. Stole 6,000 worth of copper from a building site, right? So I did the math, or I got Grok to do the maths for me. And I wasn't calculating I don't know his exact details, but I gave like rough guidelines of this guy. He lives on Harcourt Street. Does he live in some sort of homeless accommodation, flat type situation? Doesn't matter. It could easily be Blanchardstown in a house. It could be like this African guy in his 7-bed or 7-kid house in Blessington or wherever. It doesn't matter. Some high value area housed, right? And I basically put in the inputs for, well, basically say you're a person who earns 50 grand. So you're cut off from any of the supports. You can't get anything from the state, right? Because you're too rich or whatever, too wealthy. You don't need it. So if you were a person above 50 grand, no upward limit, just up from there. So you can't access you can't get any of it from the state. It's all just out of your pocket. And you want to have what he has. You say, I want to have 7 children. I want to have them housed in a decent housing. I want them all to have access to healthcare, which he has through the medical card, and probably NGO services too, to help them get up the list. So I want access to healthcare for me, my stay-at-home wife, me unemployed, my stay-at-home wife, and my 7 kids. I want housing for all of us, decent, adequate housing for all of us in an urban centre in Dublin. I want healthcare for the 9 of us. I want living expenses for the both of us, dole, additional needs payments, child support, there's a bunch of things, especially up that number of kids, there'll be all sorts of special gimmies, right? I want all that, the dole, enough to pay for groceries, enough to pay for, all the basics. There'd be a fuel grant, they basically have nothing. They don't intend to have anything except for robbing. So everything they consume and live in and everything is funded. What if I wanted all that? But the state gives me nothing. I just have to pay for it. What's the bill for me? And it came out saying 284 grand. Now, there's some caveats there. I put in legal expenses as well. And you might debate, well, where exactly does he live? That could alter up or down a little bit. It's Grok. The inputs are complex and all that, so we don't know. So I just settled on 200 grand. It's a big cutoff. I'm being conservative there. And then I reviewed it in my mind as well. I said to myself, okay, put Grok aside. I have 7 kids. I need to get a house to match that. I need to mortgage it, pay for it. I need food for all of them. I need healthcare. I don't have a medical card, so I have to pay for every GP visit. I have to pay for every hospital appointment. I have to pay for every dentist thing, all that, pharmaceuticals, prescriptions, the lot. Just food, additional needs. So if something comes up, you need to renovate your house a little bit because the roof caved in, or you name it. It just sort of sounded intuitively true to me, actually, when I worked it back like that. You're kind of going, yeah, do you know what? If you put that on me now, I have to look after 7 kids, myself, and a stay-at-home wife. You kind of, when you think about that, you go, no, that does sound about right, doesn't it? You surely would need to be on 200 grand for that. To pay for all that, definitely. It could be more. If you were to say, what about the wages of all the people who process it? Depends what way you want to slice it. But I would certainly say that 200 grand, you definitely need that. So in order to have the lifestyle that this scumbag has, who should not be here, it's ridiculous, right? You would need a 200 grand salary. So this guy is living like a 200 grand life, just and going around robbing and stealing and all the rest of it constantly. And under any normal government, they'd be like, yeah, he can fuck off anyway. And they'd find the 200 plus grand. They'd find some nice family or distribute it or whatever and go, great, more Irish kids, more well-being, more whatever. That would be perfectly feasible, but no, they don't want to do that. So I had a few more bits there. I actually want to talk about Garen Noon a bit. There's something about him, but that's definitely for another night. It always ends up being around the 2 hour mark, no matter what I say or expect or intend to do. 2 hours is what it always is, no matter what the subject matter is. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, I'll just do super chats there and wrap it up. I think I'll come back tomorrow night and talk about some more stuff, some more interesting stuff maybe, because the housing stuff, you know the immigration thing or whatever. I want to talk about culture. It's kind of related in a way, but it's the cultural desert. Always very uplifting, but it's interesting. It's fascinating actually, how it works. And I think the Garen Noon case is a big insight into that. So I want to talk about that and more tomorrow night. So join me then. Anyways, chat. We have Lockery Era 1014.5. Thank you. Says, what an initiative in 2025 Ireland. Or so can't read. When an initiative in 2025 Ireland is framed as for all, you can be almost certain the Indigenous are excluded from the very heart and soul of our nations, for sure. The for all thing is so fucking cynical. It pisses me off. Just like, it's like such a smarmy little slogany way of saying we're doing what you can see we're doing. These CAD drawing houses full of Indians, these 5-bed mansions going to random Africans with 7 children, that whole thing, driving up the value of everything, like basically sucking the life out of your generation, your people, and distributing it to all these rent seekers. And we'll sit back and laugh. And there's no way at this point they don't know what they're doing. Like, they have to be in full knowledge of it. There was a time I thought, was there no one steering the ship or whatever? No, it couldn't be coordinate. The asylum industry, the 7 Millses, the Adamstowns, the sloganeering they do to match it, every aspect of it, the NGOs that back it up and sort of quell opposition, the rhetoric on television and in the culture, the scolding of people like Garen Noon when he, gets too close. It's just preposterous to it's a conspiracy theory. It's a harebrained, swivel-eyed conspiracy theory to say that could all come together just by some sort of inertia. It's mental. It is absolutely to a T. The Simon Coveney population projections, all the rest of it, it is 100% a mechanized project. And yet they don't just sort of allow us to say, well, if it's so obvious and so in our face, are we allowed to talk about it critically or something? Or no? So we just have to stand back in befuddlement about it all and just kind of watch silently or something. It sickens me. Thank you. Finola 10 says, well done, Garo. Thanks very much. All I did was have a chat, really, but I appreciate it. Thanks for being such a regular as well, just on in the chats, just watching every night. I don't mean like chat or contribution, just in general. Nice to have the familiar faces. Speaking of which, Armchair Limerick Nationalist 10 super sticker, thank you very much as always. Lockery again, sound 5 says, next year I turn 30. Oh, I'm interested. Next year I turn 30, not particularly skilled or educated. Don't see a tangible future here yet. I choose to remain purely out of passion for Ireland. Yeah, I remain out of stubbornness as well. I mean, I'm stuck here now. I've set up my life, which is a very positive way of putting it. But and I'm happy here. But you know, I'm just not in the choice to go. I'm not in that time of my life, let's say. But even if I was, I wouldn't go out of just stubbornness, because I know the incentives are to just fuck off and get out of the way. If we're all flies in the ointment, basically, they're trying to just put us out. But I refuse to go. It's like, even if I'm the last man standing, I'm not, you know, going. I, at the very least, I'll bear witness to it, like with the streams and doing my thing, or if you're posting online or whatever, I will stay and bear witness to it. Because if I go, that's my attitude, is that, like, if I go, that's just another witness bearer, another person who could have called it out just for the sake of justice, even if it's a lost cause or anything, just isn't there, and is sort of, you know, skedaddled. I just can't. It's too, even from like a journalistic point of view. And there was a time where I could have left and I could have made different moves, and I genuinely considered it. And I could see what was happening in like 2017-ish. I could see the beginnings of this kind of stuff happening. And I said to myself, like, I actually want to, this was before I got married or had children or anything, so it wasn't that. But I said to myself, like, I want to stay and bear witness to this. Like, I want to, almost just from a journalistic point of view or a life experience or whatever it is, stand and fight is a weird way of putting it, because it's more of an information thing or existing thing. But like, I want to stand my ground and just call it out as I see it and see where the chips fall. And that was kind of my attitude. So it sounds kind of similar to what you were doing. Thanks again. Duke Savage 5, no comment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Luke, Nathan, McGlynn. Hope you're okay with your names and all that stuff. Luke gives 2. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It says, greetings to everyone from Dublin 13. D13, boy. I don't know my Dublin, so I never know. I know D1, 2, 4. Sounds like a nice place. And thanks again. Ed the Statesman 20, thanks very much. Says, in the RTE piece for the house queuing story, they interviewed 4 people, 3 of whom were foreigners, who were giving out about how bad it is. The cognitive dissonance of all parties was darkly comical. Okay, so I stand corrected that they do actually present it. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just thinking of the hypothetical boomer watching that. What do they think? Do they not? And like, that's one of the reasons I give out too, is that, like, you know, you're on a pension, you're sorted, you have everything paid for, you're gone off on holidays and hanging out and grand or whatever. Like, you're and you're still healthy. A lot of them are still, you know, modern nutrition and all that. They're not like in a rocking chair or whatever by the fire with a blanket over them. They're still quite vigorous, and they're all sorted, and they're not beholden to anything. You know, not everyone needs to be an activist, but like, you know, the way I see it is that, like, when my children are in their childbearing years, and if somehow it gets way, way worse than now, it might well do. Like, let me just put it this way. It's kind of straying from your chat there, but since they've been born, I don't see, and this applies to them, and through a much diluted but still somewhat true extent, I would apply it to just Irish people in general. I do feel a familiarity with them in the literal sense of the word, because that's how it is. They're not just strangers or whatever. Like, if I see another Irish couple with nice little kids and they're polite and respectful and they have the same reference points as me, I go, you know, we're kind of similar, you know, we can relate. And I see a bit of my kids and their kids and all that. I just feel like when I get to grandparent age and my children are having children, there will be no other raison d'etre for me, you know. I hope I'm comfortable enough that I'm not cold or hungry, and that I'm not, that's basically it. Cold or hungry would do me. If I'm not freezing my bollocks off and I'm not starving or, like, you know, bleeding out on the side of a road or whatever, it's just like the bare minimum, I'll be happy. And also, once they have kids or they're about to have kids, to my mind, that'll be my whole reason to live, you know. I I'd like to think that, so if I'm comfortable enough to not be totally fucked up, I have a roof over my head in some capacity, and I'm sorted that way. And I have a bed to sleep in at night. The only other interest I imagine I could have at that point, it's just me, like, but would be maybe writing, writing books or political commentary, or maybe a bit of painting, or, just hobbies and interests or whatever. And something to get my mind going, spirit going, something to engage in, so that as well, which is easy done, obviously. But then after that, my main, beyond all that, I would be saying, well, these grandchildren that I've had, they're not just like my kids. I'd be like, they're kind of my kids as well. It's kind of how I feel about it. Like, and I'm going to die in 15, 20 years or whatever. So that's all I'm about. I'm all about their interests and looking after them. And I look after them by looking after my own kids. So if let's say, if I had, whatever it is, factor in inflation, let's just say, for argument's sake, for simplicity's sake, I have €1 million in the bank, or I have a big house and everything sorted or whatever. Basically, I'm really above the line. I'm really grand. And my kids are really below the line, not really through much fault of their own. I would just be like, and I'm not imploring all boomers to do this or saying the ones who don't are bad. I'm just giving you my feeling, is that I'd be like, there is no my stuff and your stuff. That's how I feel now, and I don't think that's ever going to change. There is no, I'll give them something or any of that. To me, it's like, no, there is no my thing to give them. It's all theirs. Like, I mean, that's all I, like I say, all I want is a bed, some food, a little bit of dignity, and something to engage my mind in. And after that, I'm like, my whole thing is, what's mine is totally yours. Like, there is no separation. And once my kids are older, I'd be like, it's all about the primary situation then, it's the grandchildren, just on an animal level. Like, they are now my progeny, they are my legacy. And so, like, there is no, I'm off here and doing this or that and it's all mine, or I can't fathom that attitude. And a lot of boomers might say, well, I that's my attitude too, or whatever. Sure, but you have to just, let's look across the board at the systemic stuff or whatever. That's not how it is on a mass scale. And that's how things were historically, forever. That's how it's always been. And we just have this blip thing now where we have this completely upside down thing. So anyway, you just mentioned RTE, kind of triggered me there on that. But and then finally, John H gives 5 and no comment. Thanks very much. Thanks to all of you lads. Appreciate the old support, and just for everyone in the chat, thanks for the company. Thanks for joining me, and I'll be back. Sorry for looking there. Hello. I'll be back tomorrow night, please God. So take it easy. Get to bed. Ihua. See you.